Hello, everyone. Welcome back to IUDI Infinitum's session 2 of day 1. And firstly, warm greetings from IUDI Global. And I'm Nikhil, and I'll be your host for this particular session. A brief introduction about myself. I'm currently pursuing my PhD in urban planning, design, and policy at the Politecnico di Milano, Italy, and was previously working as an advisor at the Smart Cities Mission at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. And this particular session is also a sub-pillar of what we discussed previously on the ideas of co-creation matters, which was like talking about the shared foundation of cities of the future, and very pertinent ideas which it brought to the front of urban design being like a great generalist kind of profession, but at the same time, ideas around dissent, contradiction, and creating room for complexity. So this particular session focuses on the first pillar, which is connect, which is about bridging people, disciplines, and contexts. And in this session, we specifically explore how we sort of approach building trust and networks to set stage for co-creation in urban design processes and practice. And as you must have already observed, like we have a diverse sort of panel in terms of researchers, practitioners, as well as senior researchers and practitioners from Europe, from USA, and Europe and USA at large. So to begin, I'll firstly extend a warm welcome to Professor Antonella Contin, who is a professor at the Politecnico di Milano and is also group coordinator of the MS Lab, which is a laboratory measures and scale of the contemporary city. And in particular, her research deals with the Metropolitan Architecture Project, new sustainable model of urban growth, smart sensitive city, new technologies, and urban design mapping. And she deals with many, many geographies across the world, including India, Italy, as well as Latin American contexts. So yeah, without further ado, the floor to you, over to you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for this invitation. May I share the screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Uh, I don't know if it's okay. It's okay?
Yeah, it's
full
perfect.
screen also for
It
you?
is. It is. It
Okay,
is.
so, okay, I have to also put the time because I know that we don't have time. So I would like to speak about the research. Sorry, that I exit from my screen. Okay. That we are dealing with in MS Lab and the Department of Architecture and Urban Study of Politecnico di Milano. I will not enter in deep because we don't have time, but I really would like to make a sort of overview regarding a series of topics that we try to introduce. First of all, we are dealing with a new discipline that we name metropolitan discipline that start from the idea that we have to learn how to educate in a different way. So has to be also, in this case, a co-production. But what I would like to underline is the fact that we reverse the pyramid of the knowledge. So we are not wise because we have a lot of data, but we have to be wise to understand which are the data, the very few data that do we need to support our transformation hypothesis. So we are dealing with the metropolis of the second modernity. And the definition, I know that there are a lot of definitions all over the world, and in particular in the international institution. Our definition is related to the fact that metropolis is a system of place that through complementary action make up its region. So a union between multiple agents capable of making decision and multi-ethnic population. So it's not only a place where we have a lot of exchange, a flux of goods and people, but it's a series of places, the mother city, the intermediate city, but also the smaller city that are really rooted into the valley and really work with the water and sustain the metropolitan region. There are the topic of our metropolitan discipline and metropolitan architecture is related to a new context that is urban-rural linkage. So it's a space that is in between urban and rural. And this is a project that we made in China, where our student identifies a series of dilemmas of this in-between space. Is a fragmented space. There is a countryside disparity, weak connection, a weak development, in particular in the mountain area. There are some reserves place, and we have to deal with a series of metropolitan dynamics on this territory due to the high density urbanization in the urban area. So in this scheme, this is a project that we made in Santiago de Chile. We would like to underline how our project as metropolitan architect is dealing in the space in between urban and urban, urban and rural and natural. And in these places, it's not only a matter of to be able to adapt, but it's a matter of an inventive system. We have to invent a new landscape. And that is the reason why we try also to identify the pattern of this urban-rural linkage, that is this space that is in between urban and rural, that needs not only invention in terms of morphology, but also in terms of function. So in this in-between area, usually we have project that has to deal with the water system, the new kind of function that are all private and public function. We have also a new kind of project, the pollution. The natural hazard. Here we have some images in Chennai, but also the problem of the Nino that is arriving until until India, sorry. We have this project is a project that we did in Tokyo. We have the problem of the shrinkage of what Terry McGee defined the Dakota region, and we spoke about it. So we have two kind of possibility. Or we work on policies, so the governance of this complexity, or we try to work with new action implementation through metropolitan architecture project. And due to the fact that I am an architect, even though I'm working at the metropolitan scale, we decide to follow this second hypothesis. So when we speak about a metropolitan region, metropolitan cities, we are speaking about four precise contexts. The semi-sprawl along main roads, that is a context that was well represented by Robert Venturi. The hyper-oriented and planned gray infrastructure. Here we have an image of Robert Moses in New York. New kind of centrality that in reality we would like to name eco-centrality, and the topic of the ecological armature. Just a little clue regarding the topic of the infrastructure. For us, according to Graham Shane, professor of the Columbia University, infrastructure are armature. So we are speaking, and that is the reason why I put Robert Smith, the Smithson, not Robert Smithson, the Smithson images of the infrastructure is an armature. So we are speaking about a form, a shape of the infrastructure. It's a body that is part of our metropolitan architecture project. And according to Pedro Ortiz, in our metropolitan dimension, we have three functions that are discontinuous: social facility, productive activity, and housing. And we have two dimensions that instead are continuous or must be continuous, that are transportation system and green infrastructure. So this second part is really something that we name the new metropolitan architecture, the shape of the new metropolitan region. And that is the reason why this is a scheme that allows us to understand what we have to do because our metropolitan architecture project are dealing with the node. So where we have to exchange. Right now we can say when we exchange from 1 hour and a half to our city, that is the dimension of a metropolitan region in Europe, and the 15-minute city. So the metropolitan architecture project always start with the definition of a collective transportation system node. So we are dealing with a section strategy. When we are speaking about a section in the metropolitan architecture, we are speaking about a complex section. So we start from the analysis of the ground, from the analysis of the water, the transportation system, the agriculture, but also we have the last layer that is the layer of the landscape, or I prefer to speak about paesaggio in Italiano in some cases. And we have to deal also with the new dimension of the city. We start from the Cerda dimension, so more or less 100 for 100 meters for 100 meters. We pass toward the Le Corbusier, again in Barcelona, 800 for 800, over 800 for 1,200. And right now we have the news, these are scheme by Professor Gramsci. We have the new metropolitan block that is more or less 1 kilometer for 1 kilometer. And why is 1 kilometer for 1 kilometer? Because it's not possible to say that architecture is only to build something. Architecture means to deal with the green and gray infrastructure, and in particular with the water. And that is the reason why this is a typical scheme of something that we name TOD, where the green infrastructure in the reality is only a decoration. Right now, this is a project that we did in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. The scheme of the green-gray infrastructure has to be continuous. So, for example, in this case, the project was a project of the railway station. Every railway station, according to the French hypothesis, we have the pole d'échange, the quartier d'échange, so the node of exchange and the neighborhood of the exchange. So we define a traditional exchange, a neighborhood exchange of the station, of the railway station, with a series of gardens, but also with the possibility to start to infect the informal area. And then using the architecture of the station, we allow the green infrastructure to overlap the track of the train, and we connect the green of the neighborhood with the regional green infrastructure of the river. And that is a project. As you see, we use architecture and new built form types of architecture to connect the two scale of the green infrastructure. But also we have the problem of the local knowledges. I know that it's not possible to revitalize ancient practices. Here we are in China, but we have to save the knowledges that were behind the sustainable habitat of the past that right now are totally erased. And that is the reason why we are so interested in the Indian contest, because in India we really understood, working with the Dakota region and the idea of Terry McGee, that we have a field of action, so the we can say bioregion water dimension, and our project is a unit of action that is much more related to metropolitan architecture and the need to identify a new kind of metropolitan urbanity. When I'm speaking about metropolitan urbanity, I'm speaking about new metropolitan practices. So we are using our city in a different way than in the past. So again, I cannot enter in detail, but we try to identify new indicators that are the combination of different data. So we have urban unconscious, rural neglect, suburban disruption, biological breakdown, technological removed, and every indicator allows us to identify different action and operation. And we try to figure out our tool. I used to say that for me, my idol is Galileo de Galilei, that need to build its own tool to understand the phenomena. Our tool, even though we are architect and urban designer, is a mapping tool. So we identify metropolitan cartography that not only allow us to select the element of our of the food, but we identify the informative level that allow us to identify the element that constitute, for example, the Italian food. And at the end, our final maps are all metadata oriented and based. We give you the ingredient of the recipe. We give you the methodology of the combination of the element, but also we are trying to give you also the impact of your project, so the calorie, the impact of your project on the territory. So our maps are not thematic maps, but are behaviorist maps. So maps that connect the element of the complexity, of the metropolitan complexity, starting from a storyboard that try to synthesize the different narrative and data that we catch and analyze in the previous part of our research. And the particularity of our maps is related to the fact that it starts from a glossario. So it starts from the selection of the keywords and related concepts that we consider fundamental to support our project hypothesis. Our glossary then are connected with the keywords of the Sustainable Development Goals. So to be able to define a project that is in line with the goal of sustainability. So we have two different approaches. The first approach is related to the glossary. We have a semantic package. Every map from the X scale to the M scale has a semantic package with keywords and related concept that we name informative level. And the protocol map are the same for every city. And allow us to compare the different city and to dialogue with different experts. But then we have the legend of our map where we transform the keywords in data, in number. So the first series of map are the protocol map, as I said. We define a series of protocol map, so green-gray infrastructure, risk metropolitan DNA, border, environmental justice, urban metabolism, ecosystem services, unit of landscape, and risk nature. But then we have another series of maps that we name maps of dynamics. So every expert can produce its own reading, his or her perspective, selecting keywords and related concepts from the different semantic package, so that to produce its own map, the map from the perspective of economics, the map of the perspective of history, of urban design, of architecture, and economics. What I would like to say that our maps are really accurate in terms of images. The image has to be something that allows us to catch which are the fundamental element of a territory that we have to take into consideration to dialogue, to negotiate our project with different stakeholders. I don't know how many times do I have.
Yeah, I think we should finish in maybe 1 or 2 minutes. Yeah, we could go
Okay.
a little quick. Yes.
Okay, so I have to jump directly into some project that I would like to show you very briefly. That are some projects that we did in India. India for us, again, is fundamental because it's a water territory, and exactly such as Lombardia and the northern part of Italy. We are really interested in something that you analyze, so the transitioning settlement and how you define urban, city, agricultural villages. So your census is something that for me is super important to understand the different morphology of the settlement that that are the result of the metropolitan dynamics. And the Dakota region, this in-between area that is city, urbanity, rurbanity, natural area, agricultural area in a sort of continuous settlement. And we made some project, for example, in Kolkata, and I only would like to show you how we analyze the Dakota. We identify three kinds of water: water in motion, water in action, and water in rest. We try to identify, it's a section project. So we work with your also ancestral way to use the water that for us is fundamental. And we identify three different kinds of the Dakota pattern, introducing so the urban, the urban, and the totally rural Dakota, introducing something that Professor David Governor named attractor, protector, and steward. So we introduce some new economical activity, some recreational water, some productive water in the marshland, and stem cell of a steward, so institution. The only other project that I would like to show, this is a project that instead we make in Chennai. What is important, this is the project that we did in a marshland, but what is important for us is not only the ponds, the water in sea, but the system of canal that bring water to the marshland. And so, for example, in this case, we work on the Birmingham Canal that we re-identify, we rebuilt using nature-based solution and cultural-based solution, providing public spaces and productive spaces for the local neighborhood. The last image I promised that I would like to show you is in Mumbai, in Dharavi. In Dharavi, it was a problem of infrastructural system, and we tried to end the flood related to the fact that the water was not canalized. We identified three different kinds of canals. The ecological axis, so the canal that in the peripheral neighborhood used to irrigate the urban-rural linkage pattern, but also we use the water to produce public spaces as commercial axis and has infrastructural axis. And the last images was the fact that this canal are strongly related also to the new idea of architecture. In this case, we have a new build from tiles where we recollect the water on the top of the roof, but also the water of the canal is related to a deposit of water underneath. And we have a third floor that was the floor of the community that we named tap floor. So where it was possible to find for the community um, not contaminate water, purify water. So only to say how studying the Dakota and studying the water system in your country and how the water was strongly related to the pattern of linkage urban-rural, we try to identify what does it mean metropolitan architecture and our new block that is 1 kilometer for 1 kilometer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Contin. That was indeed quite exciting and insightful, bridging various geographies around the world and contexts, and also experiments with cartography and defining metropolitan architecture as well as Dakota, which is quite fascinating. With that, we'll move to our next speaker, Kishore Varanasi, who is an urban designer, educator, and a strategic thinker whose work has reshaped urban landscapes and defined the role of cities in fostering equitable, resilient, and human-centered futures. As a senior principal and director of urban design, he leads visionary projects that integrate design excellence with social and environmental purpose. Some of his projects include some of his body of works include transformative master plan projects such as PMG Fort Point Waterfront, Cambridge Crossing, mixed-use developments such as 585 Kendall and Bulfinch Crossing in Greater Boston, and many more. So with that, yeah, I'll request Kishore Varanasi to present. Thank you.
Thanks, Nikhil. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, good morning. Oh, good evening, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I'm going to jump down a couple of scales from Antonella and use a couple of projects of mine to illustrate what we do as urban designers and to the topic of sort of this connection that has been put forward. So in general, our practice focuses on this balance of people and nature. We want both of them to thrive in our cities. And irrespective of the scale, how do you do that? And we deploy three different core principles: connection, vitality, and resilience. I'm not going to get into all of this, but today we are talking about this notion of connection. And as urban designers, what we do is all about connections, and there are two levels of connections. One is what kind of connections do you make through the process of the work that we do on a daily basis, and how are our projects connecting people and nature, right? Those are two different scales. And if you do the first part well, the second part works out very well, right? That's really the way, the beauty of cities, because ultimately we're really creating a backdrop to the choreography of the city, right? We're not the fancy people who are like making things that look exactly like our images. We're setting frameworks in place that are then used by people to get meaning out of. So that's really what we're doing. And this is Antonella's presentation. There is complexity in everything that we do. It is not simple. There is a locational complexity depending on which geography we operate in that brings a whole range of variables. And then there are sort of each site has vertical constraints from 50 feet below to 200, 300, whatever height that you want to go into. So in every project, we're trying to process this. And I'd like to use the word organized complexity because you really need to pick and choose what combination really drives each project. Otherwise, you're going to get lost, or you're going to oversimplify the problem or not solve the right problem. So I think it's really important to step back and understand what variables are in play very early on, instead of just jumping into solving the problem. We're all good at solving problems, but if we don't understand what the problem we're solving, we're going to end up with a wrong solution. So it's very important. And for that, in a lot of our work, especially here in the States, that involves a lot of processes with communities and stakeholders. And we really deploy this iterative learning feedback. We do speak to people and communities and stakeholders quite a bit through a series of a range of types of methods that we use to talk to them and get feedback. And then you play back and you try things out, and then you try things out, you play back in a way ultimately that whatever you're coming up with the framework is owned by multiple constituents, that it actually survives the test of time. Again, whatever your rendering looks like is not how your project is going to look like 10, 20, 30 years from now. So I'll show you a couple of projects along those lines. One of them is here in Cambridge. It's called Cambridge Crossing, not too far from where I'm sitting at the moment. So this is a 45-acre site not far from MIT, Kendall Square, which is one of the most innovative places on the planet, as they say, and downtown Boston. This is the Charles River, and this is the project. But 20 plus years ago, when I first started on the project, this is how it looked like. It was a former industrial / railroad yard. Nobody knew it existed. It was separated by a major right-of-way and a train that came down, elevated railway that came down, an elevated bridge. So this was in no one's mind or sight. So one of the missions was to, again, pick what is going to make this project thrive over the next 20, 30 years. Which was the establishment of this really strong, robust open space natural network that we put in place. The city of Cambridge required 2.5 acres of open space. We went ahead and produced 11 acres that ran the length of the site, which created a strong identity for the project. And then, of course, the communities really felt like that scale really provided them an opportunity to appreciate the project and what this is bringing, despite all the troubles that they normally see, which is traffic and transportation. So there was a consensus built that way. And you can see an image of that more from a perspective. A lot of infrastructure around it has been reorganized to make connections in all directions. We still have railroad yards in the back, but we left a series of apertures open, thinking that in a long-term future, 50 years from now, the project could extend if somebody can build over the railroads. And how did we convince a developer to build 10 acres or 11 acres instead of 2.5? Is really, again, this connection. So one connection with the community, the other connection with the developer. We said, if you don't do this open space, nobody's going to want to live here, work here. This is going to be your value creation for the project. And we also brought in the stormwater management for the entire site. And we actually worked with engineers, again, another connection to show the developer that they can actually save money on stormwater outfalls. So this is the kind of connections we need to make. And that was it, the large public open space, how we're creating value, and then how we are actually treating the environmental aspects of it. So this open space out of nowhere, you saw the railroad image to what it looks like today. It looks like there has always been a forest 15 years later. So nature can really take over our cities if we let the nature do its work. Unfortunately, we haven't done that for a very long time. And this is about now people making their own connections and coming to the site in different ways, all demographics and all ages. By the way, another interesting connection that was surprised was all the stone that you see, granite. It was not a part of the design, but when we were digging the site, again, there used to be a river underneath it that was filled. We found a bunch of seawall, and that was used in the landscape. The design of the landscape was changed to really bring that quality of what's found on the site. And also, in terms of, again, making another connection, all of the streets in Cambridge Crossing were named after the trailblazer women of Cambridge. So this is, again, not making projects isolated for themselves, giving them a broader meaning. From Julia Childs to Amelia Earhart, the streets and parks were named after the great women of city of Cambridge. And then again, a lot of programming happens and people come to this site. Again, remember, nobody knew this site existed. It is still a challenging site to get to because it's at the end of the world. But this really, especially in the good months, the space works quite well. And this is another favorite image of mine in terms of making connections. You saw the bridge on the other end of the site, and we made another connection to it because there's a transportation station, second transportation station. In order to bring people in transit, we needed to make a connection. Again, instead of making that connection as a simple staircase, we created a little mountain. So really playing these sort of notes over a period of time, but establishing this strong framework allowed us to create this project to be quite successful over a period of time. And the next project I'm going to speak to is in Abu Dhabi. We have a practice in the Middle East, and we do a number of projects there. We're working at Masdar City since 2014, doing all of the planning. And we've done some architectural work. We built some neighborhoods there. And in 2019, we were asked by the Planning Council in Abu Dhabi. They said, "Okay, great. You're doing great work at Masdar. Masdar is a controlled experiment. It's out there. You can control how the buildings are oriented, open spaces. You can do all of that. But come into the city of Abu Dhabi and prove to us that you can make public spaces comfortable, where we're behind the 8 ball already, right?" So, and of course, you in India, we experience this. Obviously, this is for the people in the States where we have to scare them that this is a reality. Boston is going to be like southwestern Kentucky not long from now. Similarly, Copenhagen is going to experience Milan level temperatures. So this is not news to all of you who are in India. The real issue, of course, of urban heat is the built infrastructure that we have built. If you're out in the for the CMA temperature in the rural areas, you don't feel the heat the same way as you would feel in the cities because of the anthropogenic heat that our buildings, our cars, our asphalt, the air conditioning units rejecting the heat produce that sort of heat in the city. So again, making a connection, where do you look to? Because nature always, gives us great lessons, and we looked at a range of examples. Cactus with its self-shading, desert snail with its both highly reflective skin, but its air insulation, how it draws the air from the bottom of the soil into itself to keep itself cool, to prairie dogs and so on and so forth. So what we found that each one of these are not doing one thing at a time. They're using a combination of systems, just like the human body, to keep themselves cool. And again, we know this. This is in our part of the world. This history has been there, but somehow, with the advent of air conditioning, we have forgotten how to deal with this. But again, here you see a series of layers, not one thing at a time. Even if you look at the courtyards, you first create a control condition, you shade it, and then you put the water. If you put the water in the hot sun directly, it's going to reach the air temperature right away. So how do you create these multiple layers is what we learned by connecting to the past, and then we kind of sort of again created these layers. On the left-hand side, what are the 4 things we can control as designers in creating comfort? From how do you use the material of the ground, to how you move the air in the public spaces, how do you evaporate humidity out of public spaces, and how do you shade the public spaces? And these are all the tools on the right-hand side, from passive to active, and again trying to do as much as possible in the passive domain before getting to the active systems, right? Again, there was a lot of push when we first started. Hey, can we do misting? That's a fancy thing to do. And the point that we made was, misting is like putting an air conditioner in the hot sun. It just evaporates the moment it hits the hot sun or the atmosphere. You got to do it after a number of passive measures are done, and you do the control. So again, picking the combination, as I said, within the matrix, and finding what works best. So we were given two sites, 2 types of sites. We call them cool paths and cool spots. These are located here. We actually scoured through the city of Abu Dhabi and found these sites. One of them, cool spots, is an urban intersection. The others are 2 different scale plazas. One is a high density plaza, and the other is the lower density plaza. One interesting aspect here is that Abu Dhabi is oriented 45 degrees to the cardinal angles. again, really understanding where the sun rises and sets, where the wind comes and goes. In contemporary design practice, people just don't even think about it. So how do you'll see in the design a kind of a design idea to really reflect people about the orientation using design as well. These are some ground truthing that we've done. This is one of the sites, the air temperature 39 degrees, but some of the surfaces were measuring at 60s, 59. You can experience these temperatures. I'm sure we're all familiar with this in India. So this is the concept that we have developed and built. Again, you have a site that is in the middle of the parking lots and a number of tall buildings. And the idea with each one of this as a research project, we work with Buddha Happold, again thinking about connections in those layers. We're designers. We don't have the modeling and engineering capabilities. So we work with the engineers and landscape architects to really come up with a system together. Nothing is done in isolation, whether it's stakeholders, consultants, and engineers. So we actually proved that even asphalt, if it is shaded, is actually going to do okay. And one of the things we studied in Los Angeles, that was painting the streets white because they wanted to keep the streets in the neighborhoods cool. But what they found was if you're walking next to the white paint during the day, people are actually feeling hotter because the heat is being rejected right away from that surface. So, but by the time it's evening, though, all the heat has been rejected. Asphalt hasn't kept anything, and the space is cool. So part of this is the time dimension. So here I didn't get into all of that, but we focused on the shoulder times on the shoulder seasons rather than focusing in the middle of the day where the sun is right up above your head when you don't expect more people to be above. So if you make the decision based on that, you basically miss the whole chance. So we actually redefine the timing. And then in terms of creating, where people are likely to be and where we can deploy landscape, given the sort of limited amount of water that we could use, bringing them close together so we can get the benefits of the soils and the landscape to where the people are. So that decision was very, very important. And these walls you see are actually green walls that channel the winds. They are directed in the position, the direction of the wind to take out the humidity in the system. And then we did a lot of analysis around where exactly we want to place the shade because we didn't want to shade the whole space. Again, the buildings are not naturally providing different shades at different times. And we took the area where it's most impactful and designed the shade structure there. And here you see the shade structure is designed to actually reflect the cardinal directions 45 degrees from the city's grid to basically make people aware of the grid. And this is the biggest innovation everywhere in Abu Dhabi. I'm sure in our part of the world, they do a lot of horizontal shading on top of your head everywhere. But we found that it's protecting you in the middle of the day, but not really handling the middle afternoon, morning low angle sun and evening low angle sun. Those are the most dangerous because they're actually hitting you directly and they build up the heat. So instead of horizontal, we went to vertical, and that actually gave us coverage both in the middle of the day and throughout the day, so we can actually protect the space. And then the concept at night was, again, I had a great Iranian engineer who was a consultant, Vura Happold. He said, you know what, one day you can't have the shading overnight. You know why we sleep on the roofs at night in our part of the world? I was like, yeah, it's kind of cool. Yeah, it's kind of cool. And he had this really fantastic model that he showed. The amount of surface in the city that is exposed to the sky at night, the cooler it gets. Basically, night sky is 50 times cooler. So we actually created a system where these shades actually roll up and open up and cool down the space so it's ready for the next morning. Otherwise, the space would heat up overnight. And these are actually some evaluations of the projected reductions in thermal stress in the space. And so these are some of the images of the space, people enjoying it, the green walls, and the night of the space. And then in the end, sort of introducing misting once you've done all of this close to where people are, so you can get additional comfort. But again, I think this combination of the layers actually supported each other. The landscape grew like nobody's business in a desert climate in the middle of a city because it's a part of a larger ecosystem that was designed together, as opposed to planting a massive tree in the middle of nowhere. So we do a lot of post-occupancy evaluation, looking at the thermal imaging, and we have a weather station that is proving the concept. And then I'm going to be finishing in a minute or two. And this is a major intersection. Again, streets are unfortunately not streets here, they're roads. So we wanted to really improve the quality of life of pedestrians and bicycles who are either waiting for a bus or walking across the intersection. So it took a very different approach. You can actually look at this corner again in terms of how quickly our landscape grew because of both the undercover as well as the combination of the planting above it. But here we used a different kind of a shade structure, one that is not mobile, that's more permanent, but that also cuts off the asphalt from the automobile because that's a major source of heat into the sidewalks, simultaneously protecting you from the low angle sun. And also, again, in terms of the connection, really finding a inspiration from the local weaving pattern called the Sadhu pattern, and we built the shade structure with the ropes. 5 years later, these ropes are still standing and performing quite well. We were a little concerned, but then you can see how people are enjoying and using the space. And again, my biggest surprise was how we never planned those the planters to grow on top of these structures. But again, there is a blurring of the language between what's built and what's unbuilt. And I think as it relates to urban heat in general, cities have to deal with the new form of infrastructure in our cities to keep people protected to basically things that we take for kind of granted for taking a bus or biking. We need to continue to protect this. So there's a new language that could emerge. And how does it fit into the language of our cities? Again, post evaluation, and that's it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kishore. It was indeed a very exciting presentation in terms of bridging also the traditional knowledge with in the contemporary sort of design processes, and also kind of with the Cambridge Crossing project, in a way, how do we root these projects into the community? So it was indeed great session. With that, I'll invite our next speaker, Devyani Puranik. She's the Director of Development Programs at the Central Ohio Transit Authority, with over 17 years of experience in both government and private sector projects, private sector organizations. And she has an expertise in delivering vision, policy, and innovative solutions for urban challenges, and a profound passion for creating equitable, smart, and sustainable cities. So yeah, over to you, Devyani.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. Like Nikhil said, I'm Devyani Puranik, coming from Columbus, Ohio. So coming from Boston, the big city in the US, to American Midwest. And I'm really excited to share one of our bigger programs that I'm part of. And I hope you see my bigger screen in the slideshow. That I'm part of and fortunate to contribute to this program and shaping the city till 2050. So excited to take it as a case study and really share how we are trying to design the city for connection. So just to build the context, Ohio, right here, like I said, it's part of American Midwest. I am in Central Ohio region. Columbus, Ohio is the capital of Ohio. We also have the largest university campus, the Ohio State University. I'm graduate of the Ohio State University, which hosts about 80,000 students. So that's the big institution within the city. We are also getting about $20 to $30 billion investment from Intel, and you probably know that there are certain clusters in the US as well as worldwide. But Intel is within Central Ohio region as well, which is also spurring a lot of this programmatic development. The black outline of this county that I'm part of is Franklin County within the Central Ohio region. That's where our service boundary is. That's where we serve our transit services. So just to jump in, Columbus metro region is about 2.1 million people. It's growing. We are going to get 1 million more people in next 20 years. It's very different than other cities that you might have heard about, Cincinnati and Cleveland. Those cities are actually losing their population. So Columbus is growing, and we want to be prepared. We do see typical suburban sprawl in Columbus, Ohio. This is a daily picture, and I'm sure it's similar to Boston, but also cities like Columbus are getting there. It's not as bad as some of the larger cities yet, but that's where I think the opportunity lies, is to create that transformation and connection. Currently, we only have about 2 to 3% transit ridership. I know Delhi and Mumbai are about 30-40%. So you just get the idea of the scale of where we are. But it's changing and it's growing. And like Kishore was talking about the urban heat island effect, that's because 30 to 40% of American cities' land go into roads and parking infrastructure. And I forgot to highlight the cities are designed for traffic and cars by Jane Jacobs. And it is the everyday experience that many people like myself who are more into transit planning and urban planning face. And the whole goal is to change that culture behavior in cities like Columbus. This is a typical suburban sprawl picture. It's just this neighborhood is north from where I live. It's quite an affluent community, but because independence is a cultural value in the US, everybody has to have their big front yard and backyard, and more private the space, expensive it is. And I'm sure a lot of you have experienced community engagement, but that's where things get really heated when people start talking about shared spaces other than downtown. So it's changing slowly with changing demographics. The younger people and older people prefer that connection. They don't want to be this separated from the action and all of the entertainment, restaurants, and festivals. And so this kind of behavior is shrinking slightly, but we still face it. So what we need more options. We know that we will get more than 1 million people, and that projection is already growing quite a lot. We are short of about 200,000 housing units, and it's not unique to Columbus. It's everywhere in bigger cities and mid-sized cities. The home price for average home price has gone up by 45%. It's no longer affordable for people. And about 40,000 households within Franklin County do not have access to personal car. And knowing that it is a very car-centric community, it is very hard for people to go to jobs, to go to grocery store, get access to healthcare. And that's where I think the transit connection or overall mobility system connection becomes absolute integral part of urban system development. So what our program looks at, the traditional transportation and transit thinking was moving people from point A to point B, and that was the goal to accomplish. But now we are building in that multi-dimensional connection aspect. So transit is about urban transformational connector. And this is an example, the picture is from an example from Indigo, Indianapolis. They built a bus rapid transit line, and development just occurred. There is billions of dollars in private development that was invested right outside of these corridors. So in terms of trying to really analyze the system, it's not just the transit system, it's a mobility system, community development system. We started to think about what connections does it create. It's physical connections, social connection. So physical connections enable the social connection, give people spaces to connect with each other. That then spurs the economic development. And digital connection is at the core because it is optimizing all of these systems. So I'll just unfold one connection at a time, how it relates to Columbus story. This is absolutely my favorite picture of Columbus. This river was completely polluted in last 10 years. The new park is developed along the river. It's very usable. I sometimes go there for lunchtime walks and runs. So really absolutely beautiful space along the river. But the planning for Lincas began 10, 15 years in advance. It doesn't happen over time. The change in the behavior takes time. 2014 is when we started planning. Obviously, I wasn't part of this organization at the time, but I did participate through my previous organizations. And in 2020, Lincas became this official brand that we started reaching out to the community with. In 2024 October, we went out to the community and asked for half a cent extra in sales tax, and that's our main revenue here in Columbus, and community approved. So we are getting double the funding but the prices are going up too. So we have to be very mindful of how we are spending our money. Even though it's a $8 billion program, it would have been about $17 to $20 billion program if we could do everything we wanted. So what it is essentially a complete mobility system with rapid transit corridors. These are the big 5 to 6 rapid transit corridors. In Ohio, because of the densities, we have to stick to bus rapid transit currently. We will get to light rail in hopefully in few years. We also have a few on-demand zones and the development that comes along with it. Additionally, another physical connection is this sidewalks and crosswalks. We know to be able to safely go to any bus stop or any bus station, we need sidewalks and bike paths. And so $60 million every year will be invested in many, many communities to create these connections, first last mile connections, because the distances, we are sprawled, because the distances are so large, people need safe ways to get to the corridors. This is a common site. It's not unique to Columbus. Although it looks, Indian cities have very multi-purpose roadways and spaces. People expect that there will be pedestrians, bikes, scooters everywhere. Here, though, people are not expecting people walking on the side, and it's extremely dangerous situation, especially because the speeds are so high. So the transit supportive infrastructure, like I said, in next year or so, we have 40 projects that are underway that are funded, and those projects will create the trail system, the bike system, and really, like I said, the physical connections to get access to opportunities. A quick rendering, different aspects of how our BRT system will be developed, especially with the dedicated bike lanes and the sidewalks. So it's very exciting system, though it's very complex system to work toward. And with the culture of autocentric cities, it's traffic comes first for any engineers and designers. And so we are trying to change that, and hopefully we'll get there soon. Another example of how station interaction will happen with BRT. The next is social connection. Obviously, we can't do anything without the public feedback. Similar to what Kishore was talking about is the iteration process, right? Get feedback, work on it, go back to public, and again, present the recommended solution. So we held about over 200 community meetings, 15,000, now it's about 30,000 residents were reached. It was multilingual engagement over 18 months. Columbus is a safe city, meaning migrants are welcome in the city. So we have a large community that speaks different languages. So we wanted to get to that community, get their feedback. And also we use the closing the loop protocol, meaning sometimes we get the feedback, it's just the engagement theater, and people don't know what happened to their feedback after. So we actually made sure that we went back, developed a dashboard, and showed people how we took their input and what changes we were able to make to the design, and what was the result of their feedback. And that was more successful. It built trust, transparency with the community. We also hosted fun parklets. So it's a parking space for the most part, but just for the engagement period, we changed it into a little park system. It's also a public art up here. It's close to my office building. So people just sat, it's right outside of coffee shop. It's just one parking space that was changed. And it really created that experience for people. If parking wasn't there, how the space might look like. And building on the 15-minute neighborhood strategy and concept, we are working on another transit center up here. It's completely green building. It's not just a transit center for our operators and customers. It also houses programs like daycare and bank and healthcare facility, training center. So using our spaces, our buildings to even invite more social interaction, and it's proving really successful. This is another mixed-use development example. It's from the city suburb of Columbus. It's this big destination bridge. It's only the pedestrian bridge. It's $20 million bridge, but it is serving its purpose. It has become this destination for the region, and the big mixed-use development has happened across, and the transit line connects here. So quickly going through, this is the first time a large investment of $8 billion is happening, focusing on mobility system here in Columbus, and it's very exciting for a region. It has never happened before. Transit has never been a priority in the city before. So it's again exciting. Change is hard, but our community is supporting us in that. Our goal is to also make sure we reach to those minority disadvantaged community. And so 54% of projects will serve neighborhoods where minority population, where zero-car households are located. So benefits are distributed very with equity within the city. We are also watching some of our peer cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. This is a great example after they built their system. It's $16 billion in new development, 37% of all regional development on only 3% of land, which is, again, for mid-sized cities, these are some significant numbers in how the change is occurring. A few other examples of what happens after transit becomes the connector. And then lastly, I will talk about the digital connections because the technology is at the core if it's used right. So a lot of data analysis, demographic, economic, big models, big statistics went into designing these corridors. Environmental justice and equity is at its core. We want to make sure that neighborhoods with persistent disadvantages are served and have opportunities to be part of. And real-time data optimization, working with big data and responding to it in real time has been quite game-changing experience. We also use smart tools. This is the augmented reality tool because it's new to this region. People don't know what to expect. So we were able to build the 3D models and take people on the corridor and let them really experience it through augmented reality. This is actually our council member here, and they could experience how the spaces might look like through this augmented reality experience. So in closing, this is also a powerful picture that I like to show to everybody. It's just look at how the spaces and the systems can change with just looking at mobility system in a different way. So just connection, talking about all these connections, obviously these have multiplier effect, right? So over time, every single connection will really create this prosperity for the region, right? So the only challenge with that is how do we make sure that all these multiple connection types are happening simultaneously and not one is not the afterthought, or how do we work with all of these elements together? And we want to make sure we measure the success because otherwise we don't know if we are on the right track. And so we have developed different indicators and dashboards to really measure how are we doing with social connectivity, with educational access, healthcare connectivity, economic access to jobs, property value impacts, local business development, environmental connecting measures, and then community vitality indicators like pedestrian activity levels, and measure it in real time and adjust the design and the operations accordingly. So I'll leave you with this one question to think over. If you were to consider one connection intervention in urban spaces that you work in, what could that be, considering all these four? Obviously, these are not exclusive. There are many, many nuances to these connections. But going forward, how do we create these spaces where people actually want to come and stay and live and play and not leave the region? So with that, I'll close my presentation. Happy to take questions after the sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Devyani. Thank you for your presentation and your indeed exciting work of shifting the face of automobile-centric United States as we know, and also bringing up like important and crucial dialogues around social, economic, and digital connections as well within transport. With that, we'll move to our final speaker, Rohit Sanatani. He's an urban researcher and currently pursuing the doctoral program in design, computation, and advanced urbanism at the MIT. His work is supported by the Leventhal Center for Advanced Urbanism Fellowship. And Rohit's research interests lie in data-driven lines of inquiry into experimental and affective qualities of urban environments. So yeah, over to you, Rohit.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. It's great to be here. Today, I want to talk a little bit about urban experience. And I want to primarily talk about methods. How can we really sense experiential qualities in cities? And also, how can we evaluate them? This, of course, it's nothing new to us, but experiential qualities in cities are extremely complex. In many cases, we can give them names, for example, perceived safety or perceived beauty, etc. But in most cases, and I'm sure, we're all urban designers, I'm sure that we'll appreciate the fact that in many cases, we cannot give them names. They're too complex to represent through language. Things like the spirit of a place. What kind of a place is it? These qualities are extremely difficult to measure. And as a result, they're also extremely difficult to evaluate. Now, there are certain aspects of cities which are objective and which can be measured. So for example, traffic flow, or let's say energy consumption. These are objective properties which can be numerically quantified. But when it comes to these more intangible qualities, they're not directly measurable. And that's sort of the challenge that we work with, especially when we talk about empirical methods to urban experience. So I want to go through three distinct approaches from my own work to actually trying to empirically evaluate these qualities. And spoiler alert, I'm going to conclude by arguing that it is possible to evaluate empirically these very complex qualities without necessarily explicitly quantifying them or measuring them. So let's begin with methods which do not work or which have a lot of problems. And one of those is, as we discussed, trying to explicitly quantify experience. So for example, we can construct scales of different experiential qualities in cities, let's say comfort, let's say beauty, etc. And we can have people rate different environments on those scales. So for example, we did this project in Delhi where we actually had different people move around different parts of the city and rate urban environments on these scales, which allowed us to generate these liveliness or beauty or comfort or safety maps. But we also, because these people were also taking pictures of the environments they were rating, we also applied computer vision models, essentially like semantic segmentation models, to understand the visual content of these scenes, which then allowed us to try and find the correlations, the statistical correlation between these visual between this visual content and the ratings that emerge from these cities. And that actually allowed us to try and predict these values, these predicted ratings for new environments, which had not yet been rated. Now, I'm sure you've guessed by now that the problem with this approach is that these numbers, these abstract quantities, they tell us absolutely nothing about our lived experiences in cities. A number assigned to beauty does not tell me my perception of beauty of this scene. So that actually made me move away from purely quantitative approaches and towards a different way of trying to understand cities empirically, which is through urban descriptions. Now, in today's, so-called age of the digital city, people write a lot about cities and describe their experiences in cities on many, many different platforms. Google Places, for example, is one of them. And this allows us to actually try and understand features of interest that people are consistently interested in and topics of discussion that are emerging with regards to these features of interest. So we did this project. We analyzed around 1,000 parks across Boston and the Bronx in the US. And from each of these parks, we collected what people had written about these parks on Google Places. And people write rich descriptions of their experiences in many cases on these platforms. And people also take a lot of pictures. So we programmatically collected, thousands of images from these parks, and we applied object detection algorithms to try and understand, okay, what's the visual content of each of these images? And can we sort of find high-level clusters of features of interest that are consistently capturing people's attention? And what we found was actually quite interesting. People, of course, take pictures of generic views of parks in parks. I mean, that's common sense. But we found that a major cluster of photographs were actually pictures of people take a lot of pictures of their own children playing in parks. That was a major cluster. Maybe this is an American phenomena, but people take an insane amount of pictures of cars in parks, parked next to parks, around parks, and that was interesting. And not just, incidental images which have cars, but where cars are actually the focus of these images. And finally, dogs. Not just in dog parks. I mean, this is across different parks across these two regions. Dogs formed a major cluster. And because we had textual data as well, we could apply sentiment analysis models to, in a way, try and understand both the sentiment as well as the high-level topics that were associated with these descriptions. And because these were geolocated, we could actually map out the landscape of sentiment across the city, and also identify specific topics. For example, here, identify specific parks in the Bronx which were consistently giving rise to negative topics, and what those topics were. So, for example, complaints surrounding policing, danger, so on and so forth. And we could actually identify those parks which were giving rise to these. And we then actually applied the exact same methods to tourist attractions in Boston, in Singapore, and in Sydney. And one thing that we found in Boston, for example, was that the signages that you have next to tourist attractions, those pictures were a major cluster. And in many cases, people took more pictures of those signages than the tourist attraction itself. In Singapore, palm trees, major imageable element that was coming out of all of these images. And finally, in Sydney, the Sydney Harbor, that one image of the Sydney Harbor, that sort of dominated as the biggest cluster of features of it. And this is interesting because both Boston and Singapore are harbor cities, but the harbors don't really feature in tourist images. Now, these methods, of course, are, they're more exploratory. They give us a rich insight into lived experience, but they don't always allow for systematic evaluation. And this brings me to the third sort of approach towards understanding urban qualities, which I've been interested in, which is similarity. And let me explain what I mean by this. So the hypothesis is that places which have similar measurable properties are also likely to be experientially similar. Now, how can we use this to understand cities? So let me take an example from Mumbai. So in this project, we collected around, I think it was 28,000 images across the city. And these were all Google Street View images. So 360, north, east, south, and west. And for each of these images, we applied, again, semantic segmentation models to extract the high-level visual content in terms of semantic features. And this essentially gave us a semantic map of the city, right? So sort of a semantic understanding of the visual content of the city, which of course would allow us to map out many of these semantic elements, like perceived building densities, perceived greenery, perceived sky view in Mumbai. And you can see how the areas in Mumbai where you have most sky is actually the highways, the Eastern Express, the Western Express, the Sea Link, etc. But more importantly, we could actually apply clustering algorithms to identify clusters of visual character zones which were experientially similar. And so here, every single dot is one location. So we identified these 7 visual cluster zones across Mumbai. And again, because these were geolocated, this allowed us to actually generate a visual character map of the city, purely bottom-up, using large-scale urban visual data. And to the best of our knowledge, this is the first time that Google Street View imagery has been used in an Indian context to map out visual character in Indian cities based on measurable visual properties of cities. Now, how can we really use this for design evaluation? How can we use this to evaluate new scenarios? How can this be useful for designers? And this brings me to this idea of evaluation by analogy. And this is something that I personally have been working on over the past couple of years. And the idea behind evaluation by analogy is that experiential qualities of hypothetical design scenarios, which are so difficult to evaluate numerically, can be evaluated using analogy through other places which share similar measurable properties. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. This is a picture of Boylston Street in Boston. And let's say that there is a proposal for Boylston Street to have taller buildings, so more FAR. Let's say there's a proposal for it to have more commercial density on the ground floor, and as a result, also more people on the street. Now, for this hypothetical scenario, which only exists as an abstract quantitative description, for this hypothetical scenario, rather than trying to use quantitative methods to, predict abstract values of beauty and safety and comfort and liveliness, it's much easier for designers to actually say that, okay, based on this scenario, the experiential qualities of this hypothetical case will probably be something like Fifth Avenue in New York, because they have similar measurable properties. So what we're actually trying to do is build this data-driven framework for evaluation by analogy. So we are constructing a reference database of hundreds and thousands of locations across the world. And for each of these locations, we are collecting visual, morphological, land use, and demographic information from many, many different data sets. And then we are constructing user interfaces, which allow designers to define scenarios by either uploading sketches or reference images, etc. And for every hypothetical design scenario, find a real place in the world which very closely matches that scenario. So right now we have close to 30,000 locations across different cities in the world. And for each location, similar to the methods that I've discussed earlier, for each location, we are extracting 360-degree street view images, applying semantic segmentation to catalog the visual content. We are taking a 100-meter radius and measuring morphological features, like, for example, build footprint densities, parcel sizes, etc., which are so important for designers. We are looking at street network geometry. Is it gridiron? Is it more organic? What's the inherent geometry like? Land use distribution. What's the land use mix? How much of residential? How much of commercial? How much of industrial? Etc. And finally, demographic information. Per capita income, the racial distribution, the age distribution, etc. And all of this is tying into this tool that we are developing, and it's at this point of time, it's called Placify, which is essentially a tool which allows designers to evaluate hypothetical scenarios through analogy. So just to give you a sense of what this tool looks like, so you have all of these, thousands of locations across the world on the map, and on the right you have all of their features, like visual features, the demographic features, the land use features, etc. And at a very basic level, if a designer uploads a sketch, or it can also be a reference image. So let's say a designer uploads this image of this green avenue. What Placify does is that it will analyze the visual character in terms of measurable properties of that image and scan the entire database and find real locations which closely resemble that image in terms of measurable visual qualities. So now you can see samples from Manhattan, samples from Queens, etc. And designers can also upload multiple images. When you're trying to explore different qualities, you can upload multiple reference images or also multiple sketches, let's say. And in this case, it analyzes all the three images and now gives us a three-dimensional feature space, which is bounded by these three images that were uploaded. And now designers can actually figure out how the qualities of these images are actually blending together in that hypothetical feature space, not through abstract numbers, but actually through real places around the world. So they can jump from place to place to place around the world to see how these qualities are blending together through these actual places which really exist in the world. And finally, how can this be useful for scenario building? So let's say we have a real scenario, let's say the Upper West Side in Manhattan. And let's say we say that, okay, what's it going to be if this area has more greenery and we reduce building density and we reduce household incomes, just to construct a very representative, very hypothetical urban condition. So now the system will take that hypothetical condition as a text case, which does not exist in the world, keeping all other features the same, and then find real places which closely match that hypothetical situation. In this case, for example, we're getting some cases from Queens, some cases from other parts of New York. So the idea is that it is useful for designers to actually evaluate qualities not through abstract numbers, but through real places which embody those qualities. And we can still do this in an empirical manner. Now, let me conclude by returning to this image. As I said right at the outset, urban experiences are complex. And the methods that I just discussed, they give us very, very fleeting glimpses of the city as perceived and the city as experienced. And of course, no data is neutral. Urban data, just like any data, by definition, is incomplete. By definition, it embodies bias, it embodies positionality. But at the same time, I think there is still value for some of these methods to be useful for design assistance based on large-scale empirical observation. Because at the end of the day, irrespective of what the city is in itself, what it is in the abstract, it is how it is perceived, it is how it is experienced, and it is how it is lived that really makes a difference. So that's why I think empirical approaches to urban experience can really add a lot of value to urban design. So I'm going to conclude with that. Thank you very much. And I, of course, look forward to the panel discussion following this.
Thank you, Rohit, and definitely, I indeed second that sort of empirically be able to quantify our experiential qualities can be a big leap in the entire planning and urban design process. With that, I think I'll I'd request you to kind of kickstart the panel discussion, moderated panel discussion, and the moderator for the panel discussion will be Rohit again. And I'll also request if we could start with Kishore because he needs to leave in another 10 minutes. So, yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, I was planning to, just sort of introduce a leading question, which I guess touches upon a theme which ran through, I think, all of these presentations that we had today, which is, and please, anyone on the panel, please feel free to jump in and sort of pitch in your thoughts on this. I think one theme that sort of came out of all of these presentations is this idea of cities as systems, cities as interconnected networks, cities as sort of a systemic or a structural approach to a city, and approaching design through a sort of systems thinking approach in a way. But on the other hand, you also have design thinking, which in many cases is, far more messy and far less structured. And in many cases, it does not align with systems thinking. It does not align with sort of a structural definition or a structural description of a city. So I'm curious about, what your thoughts are. And I mean, we can absolutely start with Kishore. What your thoughts are on, the relationship between this spontaneity of design thinking, this bottom-up organicity of design thinking, and the more structural, top-down, systemic approach to a city, and how you see that evolving as designers adopt more and more data, more and more evidence-based approaches to urban design.
Yeah, I'll be happy to jump in. It's a tough question and a good question. And, I tell my students, first learn the rules and then break them. Because if you're breaking them before learning them, then, you're breaking something you don't know. So data is the same thing. It gives you a lot of parameters and the understanding of what's happening around you. And ultimately, the design author in you does come out. And otherwise, every project will look alike. And I'm really excited by what you've shown, actually. And then began to cringe when you actually showed the examples. I know you're early in the model, right? This is the trouble with the empirical versus what we bring in as designers. So I think it is ultimately how we leverage the data to really then sort of make sense of the situation. I'll give you one example. This actually relates to what you've done. One of the smallest projects I've done was in Nantucket, Massachusetts, which is a small island off of the Cape Cod of Massachusetts. For those of you who don't know, it's it's a playground for wealthy, essentially. And but the real people live on that island as well. And what happened is, over time, a lot of people who actually live in the island were priced out of the main center island, and they all have to live in the mid island because all the properties in the island were taken over. So all those people who live in the mid island, they drive into the city for city services, go to the city hall, restaurants and whatnot. So there's no parking, so they wanted a parking garage in the middle of this really beautiful town. And all those people who live only 3 months a year were up in arms because it's going to destroy the beauty of Nantucket. So a question was posed to the community through a vote: garage or no garage? And the town was split into half. And then there was an RFP that was issued to urban designers, to solve that problem, which is, completely a wrong question, wrong problem. And basically what happened was, everybody was imagining a garage, was imagining the big, bad, ugly garage that we always see, right? And those who wanted a garage, they really wanted just to get there during the weekdays to the town and do their business. So we had to go in and really sort of change the conversation around what's the problem on hand, and really establish the scales and the qualities of the center of the town and what are the connections to be made. And we came up with a plan that everybody agreed to in terms of scales of the buildings and all of that. And we said, so if you want to do a garage in this, that little parcel is going to be the garage. It's going to be fitting into the scale of the whole thing, that you have the center of town. It doesn't feel like a garage. And the images, right? So if in your model, if I put an image of a garage in Nantucket, it may show a bad garage. That's what people visualize. So this is where the designers come in, take the narrative and interpret and really bring the communities along. And I think that's where our role is, I think. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. And I think those are very relevant examples, between these two sort of radically different ways of approaching the city as an entity. I'd also love to get Professor Contin's thoughts on this, because your presentation also dealt with the systemic sort of description of a city. But how do you sort of see the relationship between that systemic approach evolving with the more bottom-up, spontaneous designer's approach in the future? And Antonella, could you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to get your
I
thoughts on
think
that, because your presentation spoke a lot about the system's way of engaging with cities. So I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well.
Yes, I think that what Professor Varanasi said is the answer. So we need to organize the complexity. And so the fact that for our open source map, we start from a glossary is exactly the idea that we have to use to understand which are the element of the territory that makes sense regarding the sustainability of our territory. So before to start from data and quantity, we have to start from keywords and related concepts that allow us to identify which are the elements that we have to compound together if we would like to reach the sustainability. It's a matter of fact that for example, in our case, the protocol map are related to the voice of our experiences. And what we try to do right now is try to introduce, for example, we are working in Bolivia, we are working in Latin America, and Latin America is fundamental for us because there the nature is not secularized. So the connection between people and places is through rituals, liturgy, spiritual meanings. And how is it possible to conserve these practices as a need of a meaning for our action. It's very difficult to map this liturgy. And so what we try to do, we start from the water system. We would like to make the anthropological and ecological map of the water. So understand the ecological data, but also try to return back to the way in which we use and the local population use the water, in which way they manage the water, and try to understand how the historical data, the sustainability of the past related to the local community can help us to manage nowadays the water system. So the risk right now is that in this systemic organization, we are losing the incredible value of the local knowledges. That is a risk. And the other risk is related to the technology. So technology, the use of a technology is not neutral. So I'm afraid of the normotype. When you are speaking about empathy or sensitivity, you are speaking about women, young women, old women, women with a baby. You are standardized, and when you are defining the idea of the smart city, you define a normotype that doesn't exist. So the way in which we use technology is not neutral, and the risk is that we prototype people in following the mainstream power. And the last things, I'm interested in India because, such as in Latin America, the spirituality, not the idea of spirituality, naive or folkloristic, that I'm not interested in. But for example, in the use of technology, I feel that India is absolutely different from China. And it's like a sort of embedded way to use the technology to increase the quality of life. In some cases, I don't catch, also from my Indian student in Politecnico di Milano, we have a lot of Indian students, but it seems that they are losing the connection with their culture. And that is a pity, because we have to exchange. Even though they are students of Politecnico di Milano, I would like to understand their cultural way to speak about the technology and environment, for example, and water. That is missing.
I totally agree. And I absolutely take your point about, the value of context, and specifically the value of very sort of geographically grounded knowledge, which we cannot always, sort of reduce to abstract systems. We may have time for one sort of last quick theme of discussion. I know we are running short of time. And this sort of ties a little more to the theme, Devyani's theme of presentation. You shared this fascinating case study of Columbus. And you spoke about this four-dimensional approach. And if I go back to this whole discussion about context and the value of geography, Indian cities, of course, are very, very different creatures, right? In terms of the way in which they work, the way in which they're situated. So I'm curious, if Indian cities are to adopt some dimensions of these approaches, what do you think will be the key points of difference? How do you think, what do you think will be the key ways in which we can maybe even learn from the shortcomings of the US experience to sort of have a more, sensitive application of these approaches in an Indian context?
I will start with the caveat that I'm no Indian urban development expert. That being said, I grew up in India and so have really strong feelings and emotional connection with Indian cities. Of course, Pune is my home city. So I'll take example of that. And I would say density in India, it's a strength, right? I mean, here it took me years to really understand what 4 units per acre density really means in the US. I mean, it's really the scale is what 4,000 people per square acre or per acre as opposed to what 73,000 people in Mumbai. You know, the scale
Yeah.
of development is so different. And so Indian cities have that huge advantage of mixed use development along the main arterial systems, along the main, and again, the multi-use spaces within the right of way. It's built in the culture, right? So I think it's building these kind of systems, and many cities are doing that. Obviously, Delhi Metro, Mumbai Metro, and now Pune, like it's very close to where I grew up, and
Right.
seeing the impact of Pune Metro system, where we spend a lot of time and a lot of energy and money is building that first and last mile connection. That's critical because of the sprawling ways the cities are designed here, and they are for disconnection, as opposed to the dense mixed use experience that Indian cities have. And so they already have that advantage. It's just how do we transpose these formal systems on informal structures and really have communities to participate in that. I think that would be a huge point for Indian cities. And technology, India is so ahead of us. It's in technology, people are used to using technology and the apps and
Right.
using technology to really build those connections, make it as easy as as easy as possible for people to access those opportunities. And again, building those formal structures with
Yeah.
existing informal systems.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I will also say though that, to go back to Antonella's earlier point, that we should also definitely be sort of a little critical when we apply new, methodological advances, because, no technology is neutral and no data is neutral, more importantly. On that note, I think we can close out the panel discussion, and I'm going to turn it back to Nikhil, and I think we should have time for some audience questions.
Absolutely. So yeah, open the floor to anyone in the audience if you have any questions, thoughts, reflections to any of our speakers.
Can I come in? Hello, Nikhil,
Yes,
can I come in?
Yes, of course, Levi. Yeah.
Both the sessions were more about the statistical bureau, giving satellite imaging and numerical data, and there was no organicity involved in the design. I was under the impression that this is the session where designers will participate. Somebody talks about DNA of a city, but the city is a manifestation that follows Lamarckianism, not Mendelism. And all the satellite images, whatever presented, very interesting. But these zero order streams have not been mentioned. And the reverse feticide happens at zero order streams. Now, what are zero order streams? Zero order streams are the earlier units of river streams, not captured or registered by satellite imaging. So all the data, if we miss the start line and do a foul, even if you touch the finish line ahead of the rest of the competitors, your performance will not have any meaning. Now, all I want to emphasize on satellite imaging is, sitting here, we have so many poetries and shares and beautiful uh, description on the moon. But if you see the ground reality of moon, after Neil Armstrong and the two other astronauts, only 5 people have gone there. It means 1 per decade. Same thing, we are sitting on the moon like in the satellite and trying to understand the world as it is. I honestly expected more of the organicity where we are in the age of ruralizing the urban cities, not urbanizing the rural India. And unless all this analytical data, if applied to organic cities, I think a lot can be achieved. Thank you very much. One more thing. All about Abu Dhabi and everything and concretized cities, the epitome of civil engineering and along with the design that goes with. Burj Khalifa has no sewage treatment plant. And no city has successful, sustainable sewage treatment. And sewage production was the only production industry world over that never observed a lockdown for one day anywhere on this planet. We want to show gardens, markets, cars, multi-lane roads, flyovers, buildings, and fine. But some of them fly. I don't fly, suppose. Is there anyone who can say I have no contribution to sewage production on this planet? So how disconnected we are with the actual life existing. And then we want to talk about living cities. I wish this intellectual bank would have been applied with some steering. We would have done a lot better. Thank you.
Rohit, Antonella, or Devyani, if you have any thoughts about it or reflections.
No, only thank you.
Nikhil, I will send you a detailed reflections. I have taken all the notes for both the sessions. It's difficult to recall all, every speaker, every point I have noted. If possible, you can put it before the forum. And the reflections and the explanations and answers should be a continuous process, not restricted to this hour or two. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I can maybe jump in with a very quick thought, which is, and I absolutely, absolutely agree with much of what was just discussed. That was sort of the theme of a part of the panel discussion, right? That there is a different way of looking at cities, which is not systemic, which is not top down, which is not structural. But I will say though that and this is sort of me personally speaking, that there is value in rooting some of our design moves in empirical observation, even though empirical observation itself and the scientific method in itself, of course, is always, rooted in positionality, it is rooted in bias, and every method is biased. And I don't think that empirical methods necessarily are the designers. I think empirical methods can provide designers with different ways of seeing the city so that they can then re-see it in a way that is more contextual to what they're trying to do. So that's just a very quick thought that I wanted to put out there. Thanks.
Like to share an experience, if I may. It's absolutely, I agree with your observations, and I would love feedback from you. I would say that I have in this process have traveled with a person getting chemotherapy in the hospital and got her feedback, her response. I have actually engaged with people who cannot survive without the systems that we are building. That being said, we are in front of big mayors and councils and political elected officials, and they are the decision makers, and we are not. And so to be able to really convince these decision makers, this data-driven scientific system is almost essential. It's a big convincing, negotiating, trade-off process. And some of that we win and some of that we don't. But I completely agree that these cities are for real people, and they have to be at the core and the center of everything that we do.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your exciting questions, thoughts, reflections. With that, if you don't have any more questions, I would like to invite Jasmine Saluja, Secretary IUDI, to give closing remarks.
Hi, am I audible? Thank
Yes,
you.
Jasmine, can hear you.
Sorry, we have extended the session by a couple of minutes, and it has been a very engaging session, and I'm jumping into a discussion which is supercharged. And allow me to connect it to the first session, because somewhere these two conversations which are happening now gets connected, because in the first session we were contemplating that can an urban designer be a neutral player ever? So that is where we are right now discussing. And the idea for this series of discussion, 4 sessions, for co-creating city was this, that creation of cities and co-creation of cities are 2 different aspects of designing the city. And through these 4 sessions, we were trying to understand how different aspects connect with people and how design and professionals connect with people and how it gets polarized with government and politics. So that was largely the discussion which happened in the first session, without kind of demonstrating any examples from any city. And the next 3 sessions, starting with this session, is where we are seeing examples from different parts of the continent and in different countries. So I think a reflection at the end of the 4th session, and from our audience who have been very diligently noting each session, reflection would be also a learning curve for us. So having said that, I would like to thank everyone today for staying late with us. At least in Mumbai, it's post-dinner time for some. And for others, do have a good day. And the idea of this series of webinars started with connecting with our global members of Institute of Urban Designers. And it's a growing number. And it is through pandemic that, the series started. And the thought of understanding how design is handled in different parts of the world also shaped up, and we have continued with this discussion. And at IUDI, this is a month of celebration for us, because in 2007, we registered the Institute, and in this month, it's a Foundation Day month for us, and we try and connect with as many people in and around the city. We do get an opportunity to meet our members from different centers within the country and chapters and academic institutions and students. But this is the forum where we reach out to the entire world and try and understand their point of view. So I have had very exciting listening sessions, these 2, first and second. And please do join us tomorrow for 2 more sessions, which are in the morning, Saturday morning for us. And let's take and continue this ahead. So thank you once again. Thanks, Nikhil.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. There was one more question in the chat, but I think Rohit has already answered that. And quick announcements for tomorrow. We'll start 10 a.m. India Standard Time, IST. And our co-host for tomorrow will be my friend and co-convener, Akanksha, for the session 3 and later on session 4, which is Connect and Catalyze. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And have a wonderful evening and good night. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Night.
Ciao.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.